This episode features adult themes and language. Listener discretion is advised. Reddit is a website that bills itself as the front page of the internet. In many ways it is for those that use it, having become one of the most popular websites in the entire world. Like thousands, if not millions of others, I visit reddit.com every single day. It's my favorite place on the internet to learn about interesting things and comment along with countless others from all across the globe. Reddit allows each user to personalize their viewing experience, meaning that you can subscribe and unsubscribe from individual subreddits, tailoring Reddit into whatever you want to see or read about. This includes everything from sports, to gaming, to entertainment, to politics, to true crime. One of my favorite online communities is the Unresolved Mysteries subreddit, which, as you can guess, focuses on unsolved crimes and other related mysteries. It's actually how I got the name for this podcast, and I owe a lot of this show's success to that community. However, like almost every collection of human beings in history, Reddit is far from being a perfect place. It has its fair share of dark spots, which allow those with creepy or unusual tastes to congregate. This can result in subreddits dedicated to topics such as drug use, illegal pirating, white nationalist, or even child porn. Many of these subreddits are hidden, able to be accessed by only select users, but there have been a few open examples that bridge the gap between illegal and immoral behavior. One such example is the jailbait subreddit, which highlighted underage-looking models, actresses, and porn stars, who were all not legally minors, but might have been close enough to warrant suspicion. This subreddit included images that got as close to child porn as you can get without breaking any laws, and was rightfully shut down following an Anderson Cooper segment on CNN back in 2012. Despite this, however, the jailbait subreddit had attracted thousands of followers in the years leading up to this ban. One of these users, who went by the username ReligionOfPeace, acted as a moderator of the jailbait subreddit. If you're unfamiliar, think of moderators as like internet babysitters, meant to keep the peace between bickering children. This gave ReligionOfPeace a decent amount of control over this subreddit, but also meant that they would have to spend much of their waking time on the internet, which they were more than happy to do. You see, ReligionOfPeace, as he or she was known, was an active participant on Reddit, commenting all throughout the day and night. In their comments and posts, ReligionOfPeace seemed to condone marijuana usage, and in posts on several news and political subreddits, railed against things like the New York Times and socialism. In fact, one of this user's favorite pastimes was telling spammers to fuck off and die, in all caps of course, in addition to using such other colorful language as, quote, "You scum-sucking spammer, get the fuck off my internet." Basically, this was the equivalent of a grumpy old creepy uncle that spent way too much time oogling young girls and telling others to get off of his digital lawn. But in addition to this behavior, which while grimy, wasn't exactly illegal in any way, ReligionOfPeace seemed to express knowledge in many military subjects. In particular, this user seemed to have a history of violence, at one point expressing intimate knowledge on what kinds of piano wire could kill someone. Perhaps this user, like many on the internet, was just bullshitting, but it's possible that they were telling the truth in some way. At least, their version of the truth, as they seem to make sense in their post, providing as much pertinent information as they did extraneous fluff. Throughout this Reddit user's 2-year history, they often linked to a website, which was linked under the guise of being, quote, "this old guy's image host." With them being the moderator of a creepy jailbait subreddit, it's easy to understand that many of the images were pornographic in nature, but the website name, Lake City Quiet Pills, led many to believe that there was more to this unusual user than originally thought. It was such a bizarre, unusual term that was rarely used, and seemed to have very little to do with the dirty images it hosted. In addition to this being a website operated by this Reddit user, it was also a term they had used on more than one occasion. In one of the last comments made by this user, ReligionOfPeace, they stated, I can think of any number of criminal organizations that would benefit from a dose of Lake City quiet pills. Eventually, this website, and this expression, would lead armchair investigators and Reddit sleuths through one of the most bizarre mysteries of the internet age. This is the story of Lake City quiet pills. Welcome to Unresolved. I am your host, Micheal Whelan. Before I get started, I just briefly want to let you know how you can help support the show. If you would like to support this podcast, please consider heading to patreon.com/unresolvedpod. There, you could get access to commercial-free episodes, bonus episodes, and much more. Once again, that's patreon.com/unresolvedpod. To learn more about the show, just listen through to the close of this episode, or visit the podcast website at unresolved.me. There, you could also find a link to the podcast store, where you could buy Unresolved t-shirts, hoodies, and more. Now, let's learn more about this bizarre story, which began to unfold on Reddit close to a decade ago. In December of 2007, the user ReligionOfPeace created their Reddit account. This was well before Reddit took off in popularity, making them a pretty early user on the site. I already gave you a brief overview of this user's account, but basically, this user was the epitome of an old man on the internet. In fact, they unironically referred to themselves as an old man, at one point claiming to be in his upper 70s, and even stating on multiple occasions that he had been born in 1930. In addition to constantly complaining about spammers and trolls, this user claimed to have an extensive military history. In one post, this user claimed to have enlisted in the US military at the age of 14, claiming that he had been physically large for his age. In another post, he had referenced being present at the Battle of Normandy and responded to another user that inquired about it. Quote, "I was there, but I was passing 40mm cannon shells on a troop ship. I didn't really get into any sort of us and them shooting at each other combat until I went to Jerusalem in 47. It was an exciting time to be alive, fighting the good fight." I know what you may be thinking. How would it have been possible for a teenager to enlist in the military during World War II? Trust me, I've asked myself the same question and I don't really have a solid answer. However, ReligionOfPeace would continue to make claims about his military history, including references to his service during World War II and then afterwards. Quote, "I was in the Navy until 45. I didn't see any land combat until Palestine in 47. I saw it then, both sides, and continued seeing it until I got too old." This user claimed to have been working in military-related fields for several decades after the end of World War II. In a post explaining their usage of marijuana, ReligionOfPeace claimed to have retired from a military career in 1987. What followed, he claimed, was a career in a computer-related field. Quote, "Some people have the luxury of enough money to retire. I found a job I like that doesn't require much physical effort and it works for me. Happily, it's a computer-related field." This user never really went into any detail about the extent of this new job, but constantly referred to himself as a tech writer. This, he explained, was why he was on Reddit all of the time, as he was always at his computer and had time to spare. In addition to serving as a moderator for the Jailbait subreddit, which again was a community of individuals posting photos of very young-looking girls and young women. ReligionOfPeace continued to post in other subreddits. In one thread, he claimed to have seen Led Zeppelin perform 3 times in his lifetime, and touted the drumming ability of the legendary John Bonham. In another, he commented on a blog post exploring the origins of the CIA's assassination program, which highlighted stories from the 1990s and early 2000s. In response, ReligionOfPeace critiqued their timeline by stating, "They're off by 4 decades." In another comment, ReligionOfPeace made reference to iron keys, which are encrypted hard drives that are often favored by Intel operatives and or those with sensitive info that they don't want others to see. More on that later. Over the span of the next year and a half, this user had become an active, but not incredibly popular Reddit user. They commented frequently, making hundreds of posts, but did not seem to attract that huge of a following. Their biggest contribution was the moderation of the jailbait subreddit, which I've already detailed, but in the process had directed Reddit users over to their website, lakecityquietpills.com. This website was being used as an image host, hosting many of the risque and pornographic images that would appear on the creepy jailbait subreddit. You see, at the time, Reddit didn't act as an image host, so if you wanted to post an image to Reddit, you needed to host it somewhere else and then link it to Reddit. Whenever recommending the usage of this site to others, Religion of Peace had billed it as that old guy's image host, informing other users that they could use it to host images of their own, and they obliged willingly. By the summer of 2009, LakeCityQuietPills.com was full of images of scantily clad women and young girls, including several photos of pornographic material. Many thought very little of it, simply using it as a repository for the images that flooded the dark corners of the internet. In addition to jailbait, other subreddits had started to use Lake City Quiet Pills to host their images, which they would then link to Reddit. On July 17th, 2009, at around 6:46 Greenwich Mean Time, the user named Religion of Peace made their last comment on Reddit. As was typical for them, it was a comment complaining about spammers. Later that day, July 17th, 2009, another Reddit account was created. This account, which went by the username 2-6, as in the numbers 2-6, posted for the first and only time roughly 13 hours after the last comment made by Religion of Peace. This post, which was titled, "The End of Religion of Peace, He Died Today," was posted at around 1950 GMT, and included the following passage. "I'm the person who provided Religion of Peace the space for that old guy's image host. Milo died today. He was 79 years old. He died at his desk looking at your site. Milo was a mean old fucker. Mean and ornery. He hooked me up with my first gig when I got out of the army. I didn't like finding him like that. Milo don't have any living relatives and no real friends. And other than his landlady and a few people where he worked, he didn't talk to anyone about much of anything. Me, he just tolerated. As I said, he was mean. I think he used that as a shield to keep people away from him. Milo thought God was some kind of con game thought up by some lazy sons of bitches who didn't want to work every day. So he's going into the fire on Monday without a service, just like he wanted. I'm planning to dump his ashes in the woods in Pennsylvania near where he was born. Can't put them right there cause there's a mall there now. I gave the girl next door his raggedy old cat and most of his books. His computers and Tronic shit he tagged for the disabled vets and the VVA. All the rest of the stuff is for the Salvation Army. All those years, and everything he owned fits in the trunk of my car. I don't know what else to say. I'll miss him. Miserable bastard." Despite containing a variety of spelling and grammar errors, this post received a pretty emotional response by dozens of Redditors, who now began going through all of Religion of Peace's prior post. They pointed to his posted war stories, as well as his gruff and grumpy responses to perceived spammers and trolls. The user 26, who had made the death announcement, would respond to just a few comments. When one user called the entire thing a hoax, 26 responded, quote, "You are an ass. Milo was my friend and I was taking him to dinner on Friday. He worked at home most days. I guess I ought to call his manager, so thanks for that. I don't know why he liked this stuff." That last comment seemed to be directed at Reddit as a whole. From an outsider's perspective, it seems like an odd, occasionally hostile, perhaps boring place, so I understand the sentiment entirely. A couple of days later, on July 19th, 26 returned to Reddit, and saw that some others had weighed in and offered their digital condolences to Religion of Peace, who this user continued to refer to as Milo. Quote, "God damn, I didn't know so many people could like him that didn't sling a gun with him. Thank you. So I'm out of here now. I don't do this stuff like you and Milo. Take care, keep the faith." The Reddit account 26 would make just one more comment. This time, again 2 days later, on July 21st, 2009. This comment was brief, simple, and straight to the point. Quote, "If you're interested, this is where Milo is now." What followed was a link to Google Maps, which pointed to an area near Round Top and Lake Heritage, Pennsylvania, just southeast of Gettysburg. The exact location was right near a shopping mall, which 26 claimed had been built on land that once belonged to Religion of Peace, or Milo's, family. Presumably, this is where his ashes had been spread. This is where the story should end. A Reddit user passed away, a friend created an account to let other Redditors know about their passing, and then everyone moves on. But, as you can guess, it was not the end of this story. In fact, the real story was actually just beginning. Users began looking into the trail of breadcrumbs left behind by these two Reddit accounts, both Religion of Peace and this new user, 26. They seemed to have a relationship, but the extent of that was not really known at the time. Over the next several months, Redditors began to uncover a story that was every bit as confusing as it was intriguing. I'll try my best to explain it, but fair warning, it gets a lot weirder and crazier from this point forward. I've already explained the backstory of the Reddit user Religion of Peace, the allegedly 79-year-old man named Milo that died in July of 2009. However, I haven't explained much about his friend, this mysterious 26, who presumably created a Reddit account just to make this single death announcement. Some curious Reddit users were able to find a similar sounding username, Angel26, on a website named Fark. Fark was a precursor to other sites like Reddit and Dig, and this user had commented on Fark as far back as 2001. In fact, their account on that website was created on October 11th, 2001. When they created this account for Fark, they listed their email address as angel26@lakecityquietpills.com. There it is again, Lake City Quiet Pills. Odd, right? On Fark, this user named Angel26 had commented primarily about rifles, ammunition, and weaponry. Like Religion of Peace, this user seemed to have a history of military service, and commented primarily about violence and shooting. Each of their comments was followed by a motto. In particular, this motto was, "Dispensing Lake City Quiet Pills to lousy bastards in need of permanent rest since 1968. A cursory scan of the internet reveals a user with the same name, Angel26, having made accounts on a number of other websites. Yahoo Answers, where they seem to take an interest in crafts and DIY projects. Websites dedicated to ZBrush, a digital sculpting tool that was released in 1999, implying some kind of technical expertise in art. And then there was Dig, the direct precursor to Reddit. In a 2007 post made under this user's name, a post had been signed by another user named Religion of Peace. Sound familiar? The dots were starting to come together, but it still made very little sense. Were these two users one and the same, or were they just connected in a very sloppy way? We can reasonably surmise that the Reddit user 26 and this unknown Angel26 were the same, based on the consistent spelling and grammar mistakes made across all of these accounts. In the word didn't, they constantly put the apostrophe after the second D instead of after the N. They spelled no, as in knowledge, as N-O. And they misspelled a variety of other words, such as tolerated or friend, constantly. It would be hard to keep that level of stupidity up across multiple accounts over several years if it wasn't genuine. At least I think so, right? In the months after 26 announced the death of Religion of Peace, several Redditors remained convinced that the entire thing was a hoax. Perhaps even likely a publicity stunt to raise awareness for the website lakecityquietpills.com. If so, it was working, because the site was now attracting more users than ever. The death of Religion of Peace had drawn dozens of viewers to his Reddit history, and more people than ever were using the Lake City Quiet Pills website as an image host. However, as more computer-savvy individuals made their way to this site, they began to explore the site's underlying code. This is the stuff that makes the website tick, so to speak. There, in the hidden code, some curious Redditors would find what looked like hidden messages, dating back months and years, which showed a bizarre story evolving underneath this internet drama. On its surface, LakeCityQuietPills.com was little more than an image hosting site, which hosted hundreds if not thousands of pornographic images. But hidden underneath the website's not-safe-for-work veneer was something else entirely. Hidden inside the site's HTML code was a motto, which sounded similar to something we've already heard before. Dispensing Lake City quiet pills to lousy bastards in need of permanent rest since 1968. Underneath this motto was a random smattering of information, which included names and acronyms which still aren't clear today. Shade is maintaining the calendar and access to the file dump. Angel has the job postings for EU and Asia. We aren't sending anyone to ME. No one. Don't ask for listings. Shade? That's a new name. But Angel? Sounds a lot like Angel26, aka Reddit user 26. EU and Asia are pretty easy to figure out. Europe and Asia, of course. But the meaning of ME has remained a debate for some time. Some believe it might mean Middle East, which will make more sense in a few minutes. Hidden in the website's HTML code were a number of these secret messages. Messages that were clearly not meant for public viewing. Comments like this littered the top of the HTML code. But what followed were what looked like job listings, which detailed requirements that sounded an awful lot like mercenary or assassin work. Think I'm kidding? Listen for yourself. Immediate need. 8 to 10 Chinese/Korean. Fluent Korean/dialect/accent details after contact. 12-week half-pay sequester on refusal. Then there's 2 ground types. Fluent Farsi, Arabic, French. No papers, no problems. And need formed group. 8 to 10. Single op. Delivery bonus. Gentleman's agreement insurance. Immediate need. This website's HTML code was full of these, which seemed to have no other explanation than being for military contractors. Maybe not necessarily mercenaries or assassins, but perhaps defense contractors and bodyguards. These are just a few examples of the dozens of these types of postings, which were hidden in the HTML code of LakeCityQuietPills.com. A number of these postings featured acronyms. Some, such as CCW, seemed easy enough to decipher, Concealed Carry Weapons Permit. Others, though, remain a point of contention today, such as W/W, which some took to mean wet work, which you could probably guess what that means. However, most believe that W/W means wants or warrants in a certain region, such as no W/W in United States, or no W/W in Mexico. Before long, curious Reddit users began to point out this unusual HTML code to others, wondering if they believed it looked as unusual as it did to them. At this point, several months had passed since the Reddit user named ReligionOfPeace had passed away, but users were now beginning to seriously question whether or not he had been working on a website that doubled as a job posting site for hitmen, assassins, military contractors, black ops, wet work, whatever you want to call it. Shortly after this bizarre story made its way back to where it had started, Reddit, curious onlookers began to look into the meaning of the website's name. Lake City Quiet Pills had always seemed like an odd choice of name for a website. After all, what was it supposed to imply? The term quiet pill doesn't exactly carry a happy or uplifting connotation. Well, soon, Redditors began pointing out a government-owned and operated ammunition plant based out of Independence, Missouri, named the Lake City Ammunition Plant. It had been created by Remington Arms back in 1941, where it began manufacturing and testing small arms for the US military. Since 1941, the Lake City Ammunition Plant, also called the Lake City Arsenal, has remained in continuous operation. To this day, it produces nearly 1.4 billion rounds of ammo each and every year, remaining the single largest producer of small arms ammunition for the US Armed Forces. In fact, if you Google Lake City, the ammo plant is one of the first things to pop up. It is unknown if there is any connection between this plant and the website Lake City Quiet Pills, but the name does not seem coincidental. Many have come to believe that the website took its name after the arsenal, implying that quiet pills are the bullets manufactured at this facility. In the months after the alleged death of the Reddit user ReligionOfPeace, the messages hidden inside the HTML code of his website continued. In a message dated the same day as his death was announced to Reddit, July 17th, 2009, an unknown individual posted in this hidden message board, quote, "I am sorry to tell you that old Milo died yesterday. He went quiet and calm, not like we all figured. I gave that fat, mangy cat of his to the little girl next. No services or nothing. You know Milo. I'm taking his ashes back to where his farm was. Close to it anyway. There is a mall where his place was. So hoist a few back for the old man. Remember what he said. Keep with the man who's got your back." Based on a couple of misspellings in this post, we can reasonably surmise that this post was written by Angel26, who also briefly went by 26. They would follow this post over the next several months with a few posts that shared the same type of spelling errors. On September 30th, 2009, more than 2 months later, another user seemed to post, quote, "For those who have asked, I bricked Milo's iron key the same day. All is well." Unlike other things related to this story, the meaning of this message seems to be pretty clear. An iron key is an encrypted hard drive, and by bricking a device, that means you essentially render it useless. By bricking a hard drive, you are in essence destroying it and any of the information held on it. By ending the message "all is well," this user seems to be implying that there was some incriminating information on Milo's hard drive, which now no longer exists. On November 14th, 2009, Angel26, or 26, posted again, quote, "Milo's will cleared probate. Surprise? Milo was loaded. Email Shade if we sent you out in 2005 to 2009. Shade will have checks cut for you. Amount is by how many times, not by pay total. Small share is 3 to 4K. It sounds like Milo, whoever they were, left behind some savings, which this mysterious individual was now distributing to their other work associates. Hidden in this image hosting website's code was a network of people that were closely associated between 2005 and 2009, at least enough to warrant each $3,000 to $4,000 in inheritance. A couple more months would pass with little else being disclosed on this site, but in January of 2010, Angel26 returned, this time with an announcement. Quote, "Happy New Year, everyone. We're having a birthday party for the old man on the 19th. Party starts at 1500 at the usual. Send your RSVP to Shade. FYI, we're booking a room for 3 days for anyone coming from out of area, and overnight for locals. Come hoist one for Dutch Milo." Like all of the hidden messages associated with LakeCityQuietPills.com, this post seems rather innocuous. It sounds almost familial. A birthday bash to celebrate the life of someone that brought so many people together, seemingly. However, many have since interpreted this post to have a different meaning altogether. In the years since this hidden message appeared in the code of LakeCityQuietPills.com, some have tried to tie this gathering, this alleged birthday party, to one of the most intricate assassinations of the last century. That's after the break. Mahmoud al-Mapua was born in a refugee camp along the Gaza Strip in 1960. During his teenage years, in the 1970s, he joined the Muslim Brotherhood, and as a young adult, he ended up getting into some legal trouble, resulting in a brief incarceration. After his release from prison in the mid-1980s, al-Mapua began to associate with Hamas, the organization that petitions for the creation of a Palestinian state. Many consider it a terrorist organization, but it has also been serving as the governing body for the Gaza Strip for more than a decade now. Over the next 2.5 decades, Mahmoud al-Mapua earned a reputation in Hamas. In particular, he claimed credit for the 1989 killing of 2 Israeli soldiers, both of whom were killed in separate incidents. This made him one of Israel's most wanted, and he followed this up with several decades of service to Hamas. In addition to spending time in an Egyptian prison and becoming wanted by the intel community in Jordan, al-Mapua continued to rise up the ranks of Hamas. By the mid-2000s, he was serving as the chief of logistics and weapons procurement for the military wing of this organization, and was playing a vital role in the burgeoning relationship between Hamas and Iran's Revolutionary Guards. As you can guess, this made Mahmoud al-Mapua a target. Towards the end of the early 2000s, he became the target of multiple assassination attempts. The first, a car bomb, failed to kill him. Not many details have been released about this attempt to the Western media, only that it failed. The second attempt was much more intricate, as detailed by both Wired and GQ magazine. Quote, "The elite team of killers orchestrating the kill tried to poison Mahmoud al-Mapua in November 2009 in Dubai. The unknown toxin, possibly slipped into a drink or placed on fixtures in a hotel room, left al-Mapua mysteriously ill but not fatally so. Al-Mapua recovered from the illness without knowing he'd been poisoned." Because he was unaware of this second attempt on his life, Mahmoud al-Mapua continued to live his life with his normal security precautions. He lived in Syria but often traveled around the Middle East, conducting business on behalf of Hamas. He usually traveled under fake names, using fake passports, and, more often than not, traveled with a contingent of security guards. Unbeknownst to al-Mapua, there had been a security breach on his computer. The computer he used to arrange his travels had been compromised by a Trojan horse, which allowed an outside actor access to his dealings. In early January of 2010, al-Mapua booked a flight to Dubai and arranged for hotel accommodations for at least 2 days. On this trip, he was not going to be followed by bodyguards, who would arrive a day after him. For at least 24 hours, Mahmoud al-Mapua would be in a foreign nation, isolated and alone. Someone with this knowledge began making travel accommodations of their own. On January 19th, 2010, Mahmoud al-Mapua arrived in Dubai, the largest and richest city in the United Arab Emirates. He was flying alone, under a fake name, and with no security guards. Earlier that day, his trip had been preceded by a small network of men and women, numbering around 24 in total, we think. These individuals had arrived in Dubai using fake names and passports of their own, and began coordinating their effort to track al-Mapua. This operation was led by at least 3 coordinators, all of whom were working under assumed names: Gail Folliard, Kevin Daveron, and Peter Levanger. These 3 had coordinated at least 5 trips to Dubai, presumably to surveil the region and do some reconnaissance for what was to come. Mahmoud al-Mapua arrived in Dubai shortly after 3 p.m. local time, and from the moment he landed, he was followed by a network of operatives. Men and women began to mix and match, following al-Mapua out of the airport, to a cab, and eventually to the hotel that he was staying at. Prior to his arrival, a half-dozen operatives had checked in at hotels in the region. All of the hotels that al-Mapua had stayed at prior to this visit. They wanted to cover their bases and make sure they had feet on the ground to find out which room he was staying in. They likely knew the ins and outs of each hotel, and were waiting in the lobbies of each of them, awaiting his arrival. We know this because security footage picked up these operatives, numbering around a dozen in total, following al-Mapua from afar. On at least 2 occasions, these men and women would enter restrooms to briefly change up their disguise, and don a wig or exchange items of clothing. This footage also shows al-Mapua arriving at the Al Bustan Rotana Hotel, where 2 men were standing in the lobby, wearing tennis gear and holding tennis rackets. As al-Mapua begins to make his way to his hotel room, these 2 men in tennis gear follow him into the elevator. While one waits in the elevator, the other follows him to his room, pretending that they're going to their own hotel room to grab something. It is at this point, using electronic devices, they communicate with the other operatives that are in hotels in the surrounding region. Those operatives begin to converge on this location. Upon learning the room number of their target, room 230, one of the mission's leaders, whose passport named him Peter Levanger, makes a phone call from the business center of another hotel nearby. He requests the room directly across the hall from al-Mapua, room 237. This would act as the base of operations for the other operatives, who begin to meet up at this hotel and assemble in that room shortly thereafter. Mahmoud al-Mapua would leave his room shortly thereafter, heading to a nearby shopping mall. There, security coverage of his whereabouts would become spotty, but a couple of these unknown operatives tracked him throughout the mall. It was rumored that he was meeting up with some local contacts, but that's mostly speculative. Nonetheless, the operatives now assembled in room 237 take this time to begin hacking into his door's electronic lock. Eventually, they figure out a way to gain access to Al-Mapua's room without attracting any attention. Again, this is all captured by security cameras. You could look this up on YouTube. When another hotel guest walks out of a nearby elevator, one of the operatives attempts to distract them while the other operative continues working, and they make pretty short work of the door's lock. When Mahmoud Al-Mapua returns to the room at around 8:30 p.m., he has no suspicions whatsoever. The door seems to unlock normally, and he enters, completely and totally unaware that there are a handful of individuals waiting for him inside his hotel room. Roughly 20 minutes later, the operatives in room 230 begin exiting the room, and return to room 237. Within moments, they begin to exit the hotel one by one, with all of their belongings in tow. Within 4 hours, almost all of these men and women have left Dubai entirely, with their flights taking them all across the globe. To Frankfurt, Bangkok, Zurich, Rome, Johannesburg, Paris, and Doha. Mahmoud Al-Mapua, on the other hand, would never leave his hotel room. At around the same time the assassins were leaving his room, he ended up missing a phone call from his wife, but his body would not be discovered until the very next morning, roughly 12 hours after he had been killed. When hotel staff checked in on Mahmoud Al-Mapua the very next morning, on January 20th, 2010, they noted that the door was locked from the inside. This included the door's chain, which the assassins had somehow managed to lock from the outside. This made the death appear natural, and investigators originally noted the death as being from natural causes. However, a more thorough autopsy revealed that there was nothing natural about this man's death. This had been a carefully crafted assassination, plain and simple. Prior to his death, Al-Mapua had been injected with a fast-acting muscle relaxant, which I won't even try to pronounce, but which acted as a paralyzing agent. Despite remaining conscious throughout the preceding events, Al-Mapua was unable to resist, despite his attempts to, as police would later note. Al-Mapua was electrocuted prior to his death, and when he was finally killed, it came via suffocation via pillow. That way, when his body was found, it would look natural, at least long enough for the assassins to leave the scene of the crime, as well as the United Arab Emirates. Dubai officials were able to recreate the movement of these assassins on the day of the killing, due to the security camera footage they were able to recover from the region. It showed that all of these operatives, numbering more than a dozen in total, had arrived just earlier that day, January 19th. They had also all left shortly after the killing. This, however, was not their first visit. Almost all of these men and women had visited Dubai numerous times in the preceding months. Visits that were likely dry runs for this very assassination, allowing them to get a feel for the hotels and the quickest routes between locations. Like I already explained, they had checked into various hotels in the region, each of them being hotels that Mahmoud Al-Mapua had previously stayed at. This network of operatives had all been using fake passports, which came from predominantly Western nations. These included the UK, Ireland, Australia, France, and Germany, who are now dragged into this issue without their knowledge or foresight. In addition, several of these operatives on the ground had made phone calls to a number in Austria, someone that might have been their coordinator. While some of these assassins had paid their way in cash, many of them had used Payoneer, a specific type of prepaid credit card. These credit cards had been branded in the United States, but it was rumored that the CEO of Payoneer, Yuval Tal, had direct ties to Israeli intelligence, due to the victim being a high-ranking member of Hamas, as well as being a long-sought target of the Israeli intelligence forces. It made sense to many in the international press that Israel was involved in some fashion. In February of 2010, the chief of Dubai police publicly stated that this assassination was most likely ordered by Mossad, Israel's intelligence force who had wanted both justice and revenge against Al-Mapua for several years. Israel did not deny the claim, instead choosing to feign confusion or muddy the water, so to speak, of the investigation. Israel's foreign minister even stated that the international press was watching, quote, too many James Bond movies. Maybe he was right, but that did not stop several nations from vilifying the assassins responsible and placing them on Interpol's most wanted list later that month. A total of 18 operatives were named, but because they had all been using fake identities at the time of this operation, it was unknown who exactly they were. Pictures of 11 of these operatives would be distributed by Interpol, and to this day, they remain unidentified by the world at large. This assassination led to some international condemnation, when it was announced by Britain's Foreign Office that the passports used had been fakes. The French Foreign Affairs Ministry claimed the same, and this ultimately led Ireland's Department of Foreign Affairs to critique the nation of Israel. According to Irish officials, Israel had helped create or distribute these fraudulent passports, and they were now demanding answers. This led to some heightened tensions, which were only escalated by Australia later that year. Australia's Foreign Minister Stephen Smith publicly summoned the Israeli ambassador to explain this incident, and later announced that Australia was ceasing operation with Israeli intelligence. In the process, he ended up expelling an Israeli diplomat, and that kept the story in the international press through the end of 2010. The United States, of course, refused to cooperate with the investigation being handled by the UAE. US officials refused to hand over the cardholder details of the Payoneer credit cards that had been used by the assassins, which likely would have shed light on who exactly bankrolled this operation. All of the operatives involved in the assassination of Mahmoud al-Mapua remain unidentified, despite the international press and virtually the entire civilized world having access to 11 of their faces. These operatives, numbering anywhere between 18 and 28, have seemingly disappeared. 2 men were arrested by authorities in the United Arab Emirates shortly after the crime. 2 Palestinian men that were living in Jordan at the time, who were later extradited to the UAE. Both were not accused of being assassins, but rather middlemen, who helped arrange accommodations for the various operatives involved. However, an article published in June of 2017 details how neither of these men had been charged in the interim 7 years. Rather, they had been charged, but were later convicted in a secret court, where the parameters of their conviction remained an undisclosed secret. Both had been living freely in the UAE since their arrest, implying that their punishment was pretty much null. Another man nicknamed Brodsky was arrested in Poland in June of 2010. He was later extradited to Germany, where he was supposed to stand trial for crimes related to this assassination. There, however, he was soon released on bail, and seemingly disappeared into thin air, just like the other assassins. Despite this being one of the most high-profile assassinations of the modern era, it remains unanswered in regards as to who was involved and why. We have a pretty good idea on both questions, but the people involved, who actually pulled off this intricate scheme, are complete enigmas. At this point, you may be asking yourself, why the hell did we just hear all of that? What in the hell does an assassination in Dubai have to do with a random Redditor and his creepy website? Well, now that I've told you what happened during the assassination of Mahmoud al-Mapua, let me back up just a little bit. Remember when I told you that there was hidden HTML code written on the Lake City Quiet Pills website? Well, there was a message sent out on January 12th, 2010, just about a week before the assassination unfolded in Dubai. That message invited people out to a birthday celebration for Milo, aka ReligionOfPeace, the Reddit user that had died the year prior. The message hidden in Lake City Quiet Pills code stated that the party started at around 1500 local time, roughly fitting in with the time period that al-Mapua was flying into Dubai. As if that wasn't enough, another message was sent out the day before the assassination took place. Like the prior messages, this one was also hidden in the site's code, and read, "We got 38 rooms in the Marriott on 46. Shade has the keycards for locals, pick up at the party. Give your travel name to the desk and that's it. No ID needed since we're covering the bill. Keep the room service under 500, okay? The phones there are not secure. Bus from the hotel leaves at 13:30. Car service vouchers for return trip when you're ready to crash. Don't DUI." Now, maybe I'm just sounding picky, but these instructions seem very odd for a party. Who needs to worry about using a travel name for a birthday party? Who needs to worry about insecure phone lines? And I feel like the last reminder, the reminder to not get in a DUI, is advice that grown adults should not need to be told. However, if it was implying that any legal entanglements could be messy, then I could see it making some sense. Many have tried to decipher what this could have meant, but the most obvious lead, at least to me, comes from the multiple hotel rooms. What kind of party rents out 38 rooms in a single hotel? Knowing what we know now about the investigation in Dubai, that the network of assassins totaled about 24 and had rented out hotel rooms in hotels all throughout the city, makes it a bit clearer. There was no visible activity on Lake City Quiet Pills for the next couple of weeks, at least none pertaining to this story. The site continued to exist as a photo dump, full of images that were mostly pornographic in nature, but the messages hidden in the website's code remained unchanged until February 2nd, 2010, roughly 2 weeks later. That post, titled Party Bills, read as follows. Here is the final for the party. Hotel rooms, 48,341. Limo, 6,080. Bus, 569. Bar bill, 18,890. Food, 8,030. Dancers, 8,300. Miscellaneous tips, 850. Miscellaneous expenses, 2,840. Medical supplies, 180. Fat Tommy and Stu are okay, too. Total, 94,080. You all did Dutch Milo proud. Thanks. Over the next few months, people involved with the site continued to post the strange, hidden job postings from before. Immediate need. For Korean. Fluent Korean/dialect/accent details after contact. 6-week half-pay sequester on refusal. 6-month gig. Bonus. 2 business class security. Non-CONUS. Fluent French required. 2 light surveillance. No US W/W. No Mexico W/W. This all continued until around the spring of 2010, around 2 months after the assassination of Mahmoud al-Mapua. That was when curious Redditors finally began poking around the source code of LakeCityQuietPills.com, and began to uncover these strange, hidden messages. Up until then, this had all been unfolding under the surface. The Redditors that discovered this source code began posting links to it on Reddit. Some posts began working at the hidden meaning of the many acronyms used, such as W/W, while others began to link up the timing of the numerous posts with some world events. This eventually led some Redditors to begin linking up the January post with the assassination of al-Mapua, which was then posted online for anyone to read. Almost as soon as this happened, the code for Lake City Quiet Pills was changed and then encrypted. What had once been easy to read messages now became a frustrating series of numbers and symbols. When Redditors began working at deciphering that, it was then encrypted again, becoming way too convoluted to translate. Shortly thereafter, the website was taken offline for good, with the new curators of the site deciding to change to another host. The website once known as Lake City Quiet Pills was gone for good, but the mystery had just been born. In the years since this internet mystery unfolded, many have come to believe that Lake City Quiet Pills is nothing more than a hoax, or even a game. Some believe that it was an elaborate stunt meant to make the users involved internet famous, but I personally don't believe that. If they had wanted to simply fool everyone, then it seems like it had been a lot of work to go and plant some seeds and then immediately shut down the website when it was discovered. It would have taken the people involved years to establish all of those internet accounts, make the odd comments and post, etc. Others have argued that this has the makings of an ARG, an alternate reality game, which often utilize the internet to create weird, complicated puzzles. These ARGs have been known to hint at some kind of conspiracy or cover-up, so this makes a little bit of sense to me, but again, we fall into the same pitfall as before. Why would someone spend years of their life dedicating time to creating a really intricate puzzle or hoax, and then immediately shut it down as soon as anyone discovers it? To me, that just doesn't really make any sense. I feel like anyone that creates wants others to see what they have created. Taking down the site just as it gained a modicum of exposure would be like me pulling down this episode of the podcast 5 minutes after uploading it. Nobody would hear it, and it would live and die as a creation for nobody. Now, is it possible that myself and others have simply overhyped Lake City Quiet Pills? Quite possibly. I do believe it's likely that there were multiple people involved, who were little more than weirdos, but the likelihood that it was all a fabrication or a hoax just doesn't sit right with me. The most likely possibility, in my opinion, is that Lake City Quiet Pills was a website established as a job posting board for former military members. It seems likely that they chose to recruit from among a pool of friends, instead of choosing to network and compete among hundreds of others. It's possible that this was mostly just defense contracting work, stuff like security and bodyguards, people who often provide protection for companies and business executives. It's even possible that the site evolved as a job board accidentally. Think about how certain bars can become known for drug activity and drug dealing. Stuff like that never happened overnight, but rather evolved over time. Perhaps this was just a simple website that ended up serving multiple purposes, starting as a porn website and eventually including job listings for military contractors, or vice versa. At this point, it's almost impossible to know. LakeCityQuietPills.com has since shut down, with many of the anonymous individuals involved moving on to other internet projects. Many of the images once hosted on this site were moved over to another when the website was permanently shuttered in 2014. In the years since, many have continued trying to crack this weird case, hoping that a hidden line here or there would provide some kind of answer for this bizarre internet mystery. However, since the website was taken offline, very little of note has actually happened. Some have tried linking up the anonymous people involved with real people, such as the mysterious Angel 26, or 26 as he was known on Reddit. A couple of Reddit users believed they had located Shade, the person who allegedly handled the calendar and controlled access to the file dump, whatever that means. These Redditors identified him as a man named Oscar that passed away in 2015, but that was purely speculative. Others, meanwhile, have made it their mission to go through the history of the most notable individual at the center of this bizarre story. The Reddit user named ReligionOfPeace, whose presumed death kicked off this entire thing. These web sleuths have pointed out that many of this individual's comments did not seem to make sense, at least in terms of fitting into a singular timeline. Again, they had claimed to have been born in 1930 and claimed to have been 79 years old at the time of their death. But some curious Redditors discovered a comment from 2007 in which this user claimed they were only 70 years old. As if that wasn't enough, the language of this user's post were plugged into the website uClassify, which analyzes the age of someone's language. This website's analysis hinted at a much younger individual, someone that was in the age range of 36 to 50 years old, paired with the knowledge that this user possessed of intricate computer terminology as well as knowledge of modern military tactics and procedures. This indicates that whoever ReligionOfPeace was, they were likely not 79 years old. If that was a lie, then what else was a lie? Perhaps everything, honestly. Maybe this entire thing was a hoax, and we were all getting played by simply giving it the time of day. Before I wrap up this episode, I just want to share a couple of things I found during my research. I've told you a lot about bizarre internet drama and the assassination of a Palestinian official, but I'm going to take just a minute to explore some military terminology from the UK. I know, please just humor me. Throughout several online posts, the Reddit user named 26, who later wrote similar messages in the code of the Lake City Quiet Pills website, referred to his elder friend, ReligionOfPeace, as Milo. Many assumed that this was the first name of the deceased individual, and were scanning US obituaries looking for a deceased man named Milo. However, what if this wasn't his name? What if it was a title of sorts, or a rank, or even an acronym? During my research, I discovered a white paper titled Intelligence and Peace Support Operations, Some Practical Concepts, which I will be linking on the podcast website. You can read it if you like, but a passage from this white paper reads, The military intelligence liaison officer concept has existed for a long time in the United Kingdom. The aim is to have a group of trained intelligence officers available with a broad background, who could be quickly deployed to any potential mission area, to assist in the planning and preparation of any potential peacekeeping operation prior to the deployment. They can also be assigned as temporary reinforcements in case particular intelligence requirements have arisen. So, Military Intelligence Liaison Officer, Milo, perhaps? Now, if we turn our attention to the other known figure in the story, 26, also known as Angel 26. Many have tried to find some hidden meaning in this name, believing that the name hints at some kind of coordinate, or a hidden location. However, what if the truth is just in the name? 26 Heave is an expression popular in British military culture, so much so that it has its own Wikipedia page. An excerpt from that page reads, "In Britain, it has a broader meaning and is often used in any situation where a coordinated pulling effort is required. Often where maritime people are involved, but almost as frequently where civilians are working together." So, you tell me, was this all a weird hoax, or is there something to this? In addition to the assassination of Mahmoud al-Mapua remaining unsolved to this day, the story behind Lake City Quiet Pills remains unresolved. At this point, I can almost guarantee that I sound like a conspiracy nut, which I totally understand. This is a very weird story that unfolded almost entirely on the internet, but despite me dedicating countless hours in an attempt to understand this story, I still don't have my head fully wrapped around it. I hope I did at least a half-decent job of explaining it, but it's definitely a weird one. It very well might be a hoax, but I think I needed a weird head-scratcher like this to make me appreciate some of the more straightforward mysteries I have planned for the coming weeks and months. I first heard about this story on an episode of Thinking Sideways some time ago, back in 2015. That was actually my introduction to the story, and I've been personally obsessed ever since. If you're interested in learning more about this story, go and check out the Thinking Sideways episode about the Lake City Quiet Pills. They do an outstanding job with the story, and they make it a lot more fun than I do. If you're listening to this, Team Sideways, just know that I miss you. You guys and gal are one of the things that inspired me to start this podcast, so thank you for all you do. If any of you would like to stay in touch with this podcast, make sure to look us up on social media. I'm not super active on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, but I make an honest effort. Find us by just searching for Unresolved Pod. You can send in any emails to michael@unresolved.me. Once again, that's micheal@unresolved.me. And you could send in any voicemails or text to 831-200-3550. If you want to find a transcript of this episode, or any applicable links or sources, just head to the podcast website, which is unresolved.me. There, you'll find a link to the podcast store, as well as to our Patreon page, which is again, patreon.com/unresolvedpod. Now, my brain hurts, so I'm going to wrap it up for this week. Until next time, everyone, stay safe, and I will talk to you later.